Is it going? Did you all get that little notification? Perfect. Okay, so today we have Laura Nicole Miller joining us, and she's going to talk to us about some of the research she's been doing about first-gen students. She was just saying earlier that she is going to be, you're doing your proposal next week for
Yes.
your dissertation. So that's very exciting, and we get to hear about some of the research that she's been working on up to this point. So I'll let you take it away, Laura.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, but not to make it formal. It's just because I think it's helpful to have visuals. So,
Perfect.
okay, here we go. And because I designed this beautiful slide, it took a lot of time and effort, so I gotta show it all. It is your exact, the SJSU colors, so I did check that out because I'm a marketing
Wow.
person. All right, so thank you for inviting me. I was thinking about what I would want to chat about with a group like this, and there's so many different things. And so I was trying to put some structure around it without making it too formal, because I think that it is really valuable just to share about our preferences, our experiences, our thoughts, our hopes and dreams also. And so I came up with a couple of discussion questions that I've actually faced in many of the different projects that I've done so far. These research projects that I'm sharing with you are ones that I have, research projects that I'm sharing with you are ones that I have worked on or started working on throughout my doctorate. And so I'll share a little bit about what I've found so far, the questions I continue to have, and where I want to take this. And I think that that would lead to a pretty good discussion as well, because I think we all have our firsthand experience to help us with having some views on some answers to some questions that I think are going to be really important to first generation college student success, first generation college student belonging, all of those different topics. So I'll get into that, but I'll give a little bit of background on myself as well. So I have an undergrad degree in English and Women's Studies. Use that every day. Just kidding. And then I went and I got my master's in library and information science from SJSU. And while I was there, I did two internships. One was virtual with Dubai Women's College, and one was with Credo Reference. And so that really that was what set my professional aspirations on fire. And it actually helped me to go and use what I was investing my money, my time, my effort into in school. And so it was really exciting to hop right over to a library reference vendor provider side in order for me to have a job right after graduation. So I went that route for a bit. And actually, I have been in the ed tech space and I've been on the vendor side since my schooling. And then I just recently started my doctorate, and my doctorate is focused on educational technology through Central Michigan University. And so my life has always been in the space of educational technology, mostly on like the student success, the retention, the admin side, not really on the teaching and learning, which is where I thought I would go because I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed focusing on instructional development when I was doing my graduate studies at SJSU. And so I'm actually very excited to share that I am leaving my current corporate job where I'm a VP of marketing and communications. And I have accepted a tenure track professor role at a university that's actually like, I can see it right now. It's like across the street from my house. So I will be full-time teaching in the fall. That also means that I have expedited my doctorate. And so I am, yes, proposing next week. I've changed it up quite a bit because I need to make sure that it's aligned with my research area that will continue to be my research area. So it's been a busy April. So that's where I am. I'm going to be teaching organizational communications and marketing because I have a lot of experience in marketing and in comms as well. But I am really excited because the university has a first generation college student success center. I've already met with the person who runs it, and she's an alum of Central Michigan University, where I'm getting my doctorate currently. So lots of connections there and lots of opportunity for me to partner with people and do some research, and then also figure out how we can apply it so that we can make sure that it's having an impact on the students who are in my classroom every day and not in my classroom, since we can reach lots of people with all of these insights that we gain. Any questions about like context, anything else that I should cover that would help you all? Just like speak up if you'd like. Obviously, I'm not trying to like present at you, but I thought it might be helpful to have that background. Okay. All right, I'll keep going then. Okay, so my questions. And I'm interested in we can either talk about these, if anything, like if something comes to mind and you're like, I gotta say this right now, we can talk about these right now, or I can tell you more about the research that I did and we can talk about that led to these questions. So I'll pause for a moment so that I can drink this sparkling water and so that you can just read these 3 questions through and think about those for a second.
Laura, the one thing I'd like to make clear from the outset um, is that your focus is almost exclusively on undergraduate students, I assume. And if not, that's something we should probably keep in mind relative both to our own new undergraduate program in the high school, but also to our own master students.
Yeah, so my new role, I was brought in to do the undergrad instruction, but I'm actually teaching online MBA students this summer as well. And for my dissertation, I'm going to be doing some educational activities and doing some grounded theory work to gain some insights into communication and group work with graduate students as well. So my in-person work and this work is undergrad and mostly. Oh, so one of them that I will talk about is first year students in an English class that I taught last fall. And then the other one is me doing some quantitative analysis with the NAEP resource that has lots of data from high school, middle school. I think it is middle school. I focused on high school, but it was specifically looking at academic traditions and families leading up to college students applying it to go to school and like how we can better prepare them for the writing that they will face when they get to campus, since that's something that I see firsthand is that lots of domestic students specifically struggle with writing. So yes, this is undergrad for the most part centric, and that's what I will be, but thinking about grad too, I'm thinking about what that looks like. All right, so I will just, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna do the annoying thing that people do when they're presenting where they're like, I'm not gonna read the whole slides and then I'm just gonna read, no, I'm not gonna read the slides. I put this all in here because I wanted it to be a recap. I know those papers were long and I wanted, in case you were interested in seeing some of the views of some of the components of those research projects, I wanted you to be able to have like a quick glance at it. This one, Finding Capital and Communication, a Social Capital Theory Lens on First Generation College Students' Communications Preferences. So this is the one that I did this study in my classroom last fall. So I was teaching an English 102 class. It's the class that students who don't place out of it, they need to take this developmental writing course. And so I collected, I did a poll, and then I had a writing assessment, or not a writing assessment, but like a writing activity for all of the students in the 2 sections of the class that I was teaching. And I asked them lots of questions about their preferences for communication channels for a couple of different audiences, because I wanted to see if these students who are just starting their college experiences, who are just coming into the college environment, if they had communication preferences, and if those communication preferences were different across multiple support network types. And so what I mean by that was if they were bonding with like friends, if they would like what they would want to do to bond with friends. Would they text their friends? Would they use social media for their friends? Would they use email for their friends? Would they prefer face-to-face with their friends? And then if they were bridging, so coming in and connecting with new acquaintances that have shared interests, so like college classmates for their academic purposes, or if they were linking with authority figures, so college admin, non-teaching staff, college professors, people who they knew were in a different kind of social status and social group than they were. I wanted to see if they would say, no, I just like to text everyone. Or if it would be, I like to text my friends, but I liked all of my academic communication to be email. Or if it's, I like a phone call with my professor or something like that. The funny thing about this one was when I was working on the poll questions, I ran them by one of my cohort mates because I was focusing specifically on digital communication because I'm biased toward digital communication. I work for an ed tech company that offers text messaging and chat for colleges and universities. And so I automatically was like, well, I'm interested in like, we're offering this service. Is it really is it applicable in all of these communication instances with all students, or is it not? And like, we're just marketing it that it is, but it's not. And so that's kind of what led to that. But I wanted to focus on the digital piece since I am just in the digital space all the time. And like Laura was saying earlier, how many of us work online. And so we're using digital communication all the time. So I almost left out face-to-face communication as an option, like just completely left it out. And my colleague, my cohort mate, was like, why don't you have face-to-face communication on here? And I was like, well, because like, why would they prefer that? Like, we're coming out of COVID and lots of people are like on social all the time. So I was just focusing on digital, but yeah, sure, I'll throw it in there. And then not surprisingly, after doing the literature review, most people preferred face-to-face communication. Is that surprising to anybody? Or do you feel like that's like, yeah, of course, people prefer face-to-face communication?
I think because we're coming out of COVID and we were kind of denied that connection for so long, that
Mhm.
I think it's right. Because I feel like prior to COVID, you ask anybody and they were like, don't call me. They were like, just text me, whatever. And then I feel like having that kind of taken away from us definitely put us in a position where it's like, I want to see your face and let's chat and let's get a coffee in person kind of thing. So I wonder too how much of that we're still being affected by, just global issue.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Let me see if there what else I want to. So talking about the implications too, but the thing that I thought, and this is where there is an opportunity for future research and rigorous research, because this was just a study. It was with these classes that I was teaching, and it can be refined for sure. But it seemed like from what I saw that I was thinking that some of the trends pointed toward students saying that their preference was something that they might have thought was more appropriate for that audience. And I want to say that with all of the like disclaimers in the whole world, because I would never write that somewhere and like be like, okay, publish that. But the data that I saw and like some of the writing assessments, or I keep calling them assessments, but writing exercises where I was asking people to explain like, how do you prefer to communicate and why? It seemed to offer this theme of they wanted to make sure that they weren't misunderstood, and they wanted to align with some expectation of like communicating in an academic environment. So this is just the start. This was for me to see if my assumptions were correct, and they were not. And now I would love to go deeper into this and compare first generation college students' preferences or express preferences across against the continuing generation college students' preferences as well. And then better understand why they think those are their preferences too. That's like it's in my head, and the social theory, social capital theory lens is really interesting with that as well, since it does highlight how you act different ways with different audiences. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that it's important to explore this too, because working on the marketing side of an ed tech company, I see this trend where we're just like trying to generalize, and we're saying this generation likes to communicate like this, or this like person with this background likes to communicate like this, when I don't think that that's necessarily true. Obviously, you're trying to do it because you're trying to scale and you're trying to introduce technology because it will help us to connect with more people. But I think we need to be really critical about understanding, why do people prefer to communicate in these ways? And do they prefer to communicate in these ways with everyone they're communicating with? So that's the first one. And then I basically just summed that piece up. My next one, and I can go, I saw the chat had some comments.
Think we're
Oh
just
man, okay.
adjusting.
I should be
Okay.
paying attention to the chat more. Sorry about that.
We tend to have usually two going. Usually we've got a chat conversation and then a speaking conversation going. So
Okay,
it
all
gets
right.
it can get a little confusing sometimes. But yeah, they were just I think they were just debating if Zoom counts as face to face with your camera on.
I love that. That is a great question too, because if I'm thinking about my own preferences, like we were talking about Laura at the beginning, I really will be like, can you just call me? Because I don't want to look at myself, and I want to be able to walk. I want to be mobile. And I feel like, yeah, Zoom is kind of like the same pressures as face-to-face. And so I kind of think about that as face-to-face too. So I don't know whose side I just agreed with, but whoever said that, I'm with you. Okay, so the second research project. So this one I just did for a data-driven decision-making class. And it's my quantitative research methods professor, and I'm not the quantitative type. I was thinking I was going to do mixed method for a while because I felt like it would be very rigorous and it's a good idea, but I definitely lean more toward qualitative. And so that's what I'm doing for my proposal that is coming up. So this one, I took his lead a lot, but I did focus on this idea of academic traditions and academic traditions specifically being parents' educational achievement and students' academic performance. So this was inspired by this idea of if you look for writing support, if you look for understanding how you can better prepare students to be successful when they land at college and they need to write in an academic way. A lot of what you find in the literature is about like English as a second language learners or international students or students who were not born here and did not come from these educational systems that ideally we're more connected to. But I thought that that was interesting that there's not a lot of coverage of that connection, since ideally we would have more opportunity to impact those students and to support them and to connect with them earlier because they're down the street at the high school. And so we could just go there and help them, hopefully. So I thought that that was interesting because obviously English as a second language learners need support. Obviously, the international pipeline is going to be very important for overcoming a demographic cliff, and also having diversity on campus adds so much. And so that's necessary. But I was wondering if there's an opportunity for us to also help these other students who maybe we could help earlier, was my thinking. And I have this a lot. I teach at 2 schools right now. One of them is it's mostly international students and student athletes. It's a D3 school. And then the other one is the one where I'm going to be teaching full-time in the fall. And that's mostly traditional age students and some student athletes, but not a lot of international students either. And so it's interesting because a lot of times I'm comparing my experiences because I go from this campus to this campus every day. So this project looked into that and made a lot of like correlations and trying to understand if there are any trends that I could then look at further. What I did was look at parental educational achievement levels. So mother's highest level of education achieved, father's highest level of education achieved. But the data that I had, since this is secondary and I was using this federal source of data, anything that they did wrong would come over. So thanks for that. And then also I didn't have a chance to like see who's mothers and fathers. I just saw mother's highest level, father's highest level. So this is again, just like a seed of something to do in the future as well. But I guess they're not interesting findings, but they did lead to interesting questions. So what I found was students who have at least one parent who graduated college scored the highest on this National Assessment of Educational Progress writing test. And the students who scored the lowest were those who didn't know their parents' educational level. And then that was followed by those who reported their parent did not finish high school. So seems like if you have academic traditions in your household with one of your parents, then you are likely to be able to score higher on this National Assessment of Educational Progress. So I came to this, and this is what led to some of those discussion questions. Okay, what do we do with that? So more research, obviously, because that's always the answer. But also, I was thinking maybe we could figure out which students have academic household traditions and which do not. And then maybe we can differentiate writing support, differentiate writing programs earlier for them. I don't know who's funding it. Ideally, we'll find someone very generous and they will help us out. But it seems like we could use some of this demographic information in order to better target supports that are funded. And so that's where I'm headed with this. But I do, and then obviously there's more opportunity. So comparing like mothers and fathers, just mothers, just fathers, neither. And then looking at other subjects as well. And the NAEP database that I used for this project, it did have other subject information, so math and science, and a couple of others as well. And so there's an opportunity to do similar assessments to see, okay, are there trends in just writing, or is it trends in math and science and these other areas as well? But these are really the questions, because as you can see from those two research projects, I'm trying to generalize because I mean, with technology, we want to scale solutions, we want to scale connection, we want to reach more people and serve more people and make things better for more people. But I'm often wondering, and when I'm in the classroom as well, because my students I'll either know that they're first gen students because I've got the information, because we're trying to get them to come to these events that we're having and that sort of thing, or they're volunteering it. And I always am thinking like, okay, I want to make sure that this person knows that that's my experience too, so that they can see themselves in an academic career if that's what they want to do. But I also don't want to stereotype or stigmatize or anything like that. So I wonder if anybody else has that thought, has that question, and then has any ideas too about how do we target with support first generation college students, but not stereotype and not stigmatize those who identify with that label?
I feel like that's such a good question too. I don't have an answer. But it's
I thought
such a
I
good
thought I was coming in for
question.
the answers.
And I don't know. I feel like every time I share an experience that I feel like might be unique, someone else has like totally been there, and that's part of why we love this group so much. But
Mhm.
like I've definitely had experiences where, so for example, being first gen, so I was on like I don't know if scholarship is the right word. It was like a bursary or a grant or some kind of something. It was a fund, and that's how I did my undergrad. And basically, it was because I came from a family that would never have the means to send me to post-secondary school because nobody had ever been to school, nobody knew about school. Like it just wasn't talked about in my family. And I remember sharing this with somebody once about how, yeah, like my tuition is paid and my books are paid and whatever. And they were like, I'd rather earn my own way. And I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
rude. I'm like, you have no idea what I've been through to quote unquote earn my right to be here. Like it was just, and I don't know if other people have experienced things like that,
yeah.
but it's like there's definitely like, and I know Dr. Bernier has talked about too, how like some other faculty members don't think that first gen should be a thing that is identifiable in students. And so I think that is a really good question that I don't have an answer to, but yeah.
Yeah, right, right. Okay,
Well,
so
I wanted to add to that, Laura, because I think that I came to this in the exact same way, right? I was a person whose parents didn't go to college and had no means to pay for college. And of course, I'm older. So I'm doing this later in my life. And I think there's a bit of shame that might come with some of that. And that shame is interesting because it's shame on two ends. It's shame on parents who weren't able to go to college and weren't able to send you to college. But then it's also yourself dealing with it, like that I'm now having to do this. And
Mhm.
I've never done this before. And I'm the first one with no foundation below me. And I think that that's really being mindful of that might be the most important key. This is coming from my perspective. It's just destigmatizing it in a
Mhm.
certain way that is more conscious of people's shame.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. And so I watched a documentary because I did a qualitative project that did some document analysis. I think it was from Kansas State, maybe, and it was really good. It was about first generation college student, the experience and lots of different perspectives. But it was talking about, Laura, what you were saying about how we have these experiences and we're like, oh, wow, this is like a really challenging component and this is kind of embarrassing. And I'm probably the only one who has experienced this. And what came to mind for me is when I was going through undergrad, my family, like, they wouldn't fill out the FAFSA. And I was like, but you have to because I need your information. And like, I don't have it because I'm 17. And they were like, no. And I'm like, okay. And so I never really thought about that until I was watching this documentary and it mentioned how like it wasn't because they were being difficult, it was because they felt ashamed and they didn't want to necessarily share like the resources that we had. And so like hearing that from that documentary, I was like, Oh my gosh, there's a lot of things I'm probably facing that I'm like, oh, I'm misreading why this thing happened. And they, other people, especially people with these backgrounds, have experienced this as well, because it's just a shared human experience to have like that shame.
Caitlin
So
in the
yeah,
chat said that she thinks part of it is just having the discussion like we are now. Yeah, build a strong
yeah.
network if more students knew that they're not alone, which is what we're trying to do here.
I love it. Yeah. And I've brought it up too in my classes this semester. I just like offhand will mention that I'm a first generation college student. And then now I have a couple of students who they like once you say it, they're like connecting and they're like seeing and they're like more talking about them wanting to break these like generational wealth, lack of wealth, and then like why they're here and how they're trying to like inspire their siblings and stuff. And then I can use that in turn to motivate them when they're like, I'm not coming to class next week because I need a break. And I'm like, okay, I'm sure you need a break, but let's talk about it. What are your goals? So I can see that on that smaller level too, of just in my classes, I will mention it. And then I have two people, and there are others who are first generation college students too. So not everybody is like, oh, okay, let me talk about that. But for those, I wouldn't have necessarily heard those motivations and those experiences if I didn't just say it as like, oh, this is a research area that I'm focused on because this is my experience. And then I'm able to connect them with the support services that are on campus as well. That is a good question too. Gosh, we're gonna leave this chat with all the good questions. I see the question. Any thoughts on why it's sometimes so difficult for us to engage on social class material backgrounds as compared with other DEI identities? I think it's what you said, Laura, about people will be like, well, I think you should just have earned it. And so it feels like it's this internalized thing, even if you're like a child, where you're like, I can't have a job. But I think there is this idea of, well, that's something like that's on me or on my family. And so I think that's why it's so difficult.
I think also a huge part of it is just when you come from a family where you have never had to question, like when your parents are telling you from the time you're 4 that you're going to go to school and you know it's going to be paid for, it's not necessarily like entitlement. It's just that that's just what has been presented to you. And I remember having a discussion in one of my very first undergrad classes. And I remember leaving the lecture hall like shaking because I was so like thrown over the conversation. But one of the things that had come up was like, oh, if you wanted to go to school and you were trying to, break the cycle of poverty. And one of the guys in my class was like, well, you could just go to the bank and get a loan. And I was like, sir, you can't just walk into a bank and get a loan. And he's like, well, why not? And I was like, it doesn't work that way. Like, there's just no, like, we just had to end the conversation because like he genuinely did not understand why it's not possible for some people to just go get a loan and go to school. And so I think that plays into it as well, as just like, I think, could be obviously some entitlement as well, but I think sometimes when you're in the middle, you just don't care to know about it. Like you're just blissfully ignorant about it, right? And then when somebody does bring it up, it just kind of gets like, it's such an uncomfortable thing because, when one person has something and one person doesn't, it can get really uncomfortable really, really quickly. And I think that's part of why it's like such a hard thing to talk about. But it is interesting because obviously not all the time, but very often first gen and low income goes hand in hand, right? So yeah, I do find that. I think there's lots of reasons for that one.
Yes.
And I think that one is tough to tackle.
Yeah. And I think about this too with like, okay, so my husband, he is not a first gen student and my son will not be. And so how do I, like, I've learned so much from having to just do it myself. And the other thing that's kind of funny to me is going into this proposal process. I'm like, the other day I said like, okay, first gen problems, because I have no idea what I'm doing. Somebody's going to have to tell me like, what is a how do you propose your dissertation? And like, I forgot how that felt because now I'm like, once I was an undergrad, I was in that all the time. When I was getting my grad degree, I had already had some sort of experience with academia and like navigating that. And so it was like a little more comfortable. And now I'm in it again where I'm like, embarrassed to ask. And I'm like, I gotta ask because I can't just go into this session and not have like slides if they're expecting slides. But even at this point where I'm a tenure track faculty member starting in fall, I have degrees, I have the validation that I have sought for so long externally. I still was like hesitant because I didn't want them to think I didn't know what I was doing, even though I didn't know what I was doing. Like, what is that? Why?
Mine was so bad that I didn't even know how to apply to grad school.
Yeah.
And that is something that's like, you're literally Googling how to do something because nobody in your life has ever done that. And that is a remarkable thing, to be the one trying to figure out, how do you apply to grad school? What do you need to do it? What is so on and so forth, even though you have a bachelor's degree. Like, it's still, it's a huge thing to be out of your element and not know what to do, even though you think you have everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it just never goes away.
No, it really doesn't. Honestly.
Yeah. And I mean, it's good. I also think it's good. I was talking to one of my colleagues about this too, about the feeling, if you are like every semester. So I've taught before, I'm going to teach again, but every semester when you are getting prepped and then you are walking into the classroom, it's different. It's a different energy. It's a different vibe. It's a different community. And so there's like anxiety with it. And I like it because I know it's going to be this like high peak of anxiety, but then it will go away and I will be comfortable. And so I kind of like have like trained myself to like appreciate it better because of having to go through all of this, of all of that stuff, all of that experience of having to motivate yourself to go to college, figure out if it's worth the investment, figure out how to pay for it, figure out how to like do it. And so I'm like more appreciative of those experiences because I feel like they do get me like alert. And I can pep talk myself through it to be like, it's not going to always be like this. It's just going to be this like this. And then it'll quickly become something you already did and that you are comfortable with. And I'm trying to do that with the proposal and the research stuff now too, because I think that's who we have, right? Is like us and the experiences that we've had and the skills and the grit that we have gained from doing this in a different way and trying to transfer that. Right. Yeah. Elements of hazing that go on about the steps, practices, and conventions. Yep.
I think that's one of the most intimidating things for first gens, just in general, is that like academia, you know, for better or for worse, has a reputation, right? Like snooty professors and, you know, Ivy League schools and all of this and all of that, right? And I think too, like other people, like, so when you come from a place where no one else has gone to school and you're the first one to do it, the people around you can be really quick. They can go either way, right? It can be incredibly proud and supportive, or it can be, oh, now you're one of them.
Yep.
And you think you're better than us and that. So I think it's like, can be doubly difficult with that element of things because the hazing can come from the people who are supposed to support you too. It can come from both sides. So that's tough too.
Yes, for sure. Yes, I've definitely had that experience where I think people will be more excited for me when I reach like these milestones, and then I tell them and they're not excited, and I'm like, am I too excited about, is this not maybe this isn't a milestone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gaslighting myself. Like, why am I doing that? This is a milestone. This is. All right, but that's a great transition to my second question. So what does supporting first generation college students look like? Is it making us successful in that academic system that you're talking about and in those systems that you're talking about? Or is it changing the system and making it more equitable? Or is it both?
That is an interesting question. I think ideally both. Like in a perfect world, right? You'd have a system that would make it easier, but you'd also have resources, right?
Mm-hmm. And the system, that's hard. That's a undertaking.
Oh yeah. I came from, like, I did my undergrad in classics, so it's like the old school. And so doing research and like doing research about the history of classics, and it was just like, so it's just like the pinnacle of like the tie and the nose in the air, right? And yeah, the system is just like, it can be great. Like you'll get I had classics profs who are the reason that I'm where I am today because they took the time to make sure we were successful. But like sometimes it just feels like you get forgotten if you don't already know everything and you don't even know where to go to get the help. And
Mhm.
yeah.
And for my dissertation, I'm using adaptive structuration theory, which is the idea that we're limited by the systems, but we create the systems, and we limit ourselves while we're creating the systems and limit the systems and create the system. Like it's like this like endless loop. But I think about that too, because it's the other people who have their like noses in the air and their ties. But then part of it is also probably like us going into these environments and assuming that we don't know as much as the people with the fancy jackets do too. And then, and that's not because of us, but it's because of us having these experiences and being exposed to these people who do honestly think that they know more about something than we do. And so I'm intrigued by that idea of we have more power than we think we do, but also we don't, but we do. So that's more
Yeah, because
questions.
the interesting thing is like once you learn something, then you're like, you're part of the group that knows now, right? And
Yeah,
it's not like
yeah.
and I mean, I feel like we're doing our part a little bit with groups like this, you know, like we try to be that resource for people.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, it's kind of, it's not like once we get on the inside, we start shouting and breaking down the walls. We just kind of get in and accept it and keep our head down. Like maybe they won't notice that I'm here if I just stay real quiet. Like,
Mhm.
so that's a really interesting concept as well.
Yes.
I never thought of it
Okay.
that way.
Okay, so that's it. I had another thought, but it escaped me because I did not write it on this piece of paper. Maybe it will come back. That's my other question too, because I've seen this a lot. And like I mentioned, I met the person who runs our first generation college student success center at the university where I'm teaching. I've heard about programming. I've heard about grants for programming. The first generation college student, I didn't even realize I was a first generation college student until like 10 years ago, like, or like sometime recent where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, I'm that. And so I feel like it's like more widely accepted. And then I think, Laura, you were mentioning that someone said that like that shouldn't even be a thing, like it shouldn't be a term or a label. I'm wondering, can we keep it from being a buzzword or a phrase that is a buzzword, a buzz phrase, and hold support programs and their administrators accountable for really making it make a difference for first generation college students? Do we need to, or do you feel like doesn't really need our effort?
These are all like good questions.
And this is what I mean, I feel like this is what comes up for me when because I like the idea of scaling. I like the idea of trying to generalize an understanding of how to serve people who have been underserved. But it's such a thin line between stereotyping or using it to have something that creates some other group that they don't want to associate with because of the shame of like everyone knowing that they're first gen and like then maybe likely to be lower income or whatever comes with that as well. And so I'm intrigued by how we assess these programs, and does it matter? Because I don't like, maybe not, maybe it's fine. Maybe like the visibility is good. Maybe the marketing of it is good because it will make people have more groups like this. But I'm sure that at some point, it's kind of like with AI right now. So my company that I work with, I'm in that space where it's ed tech. And so it's everything is touched by AI, but not necessarily to the point where you would think it is. It's just like some of the companies, their marketing has been touched by AI. So they're writing all this stuff. They're not really adding to the conversation, but they're all like AI, 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 AI. And so I was thinking about that and how every company has to have like something they're saying about AI and like some sort of like, and like not strategy even, but some sort of tie to AI because it's what people are talking about and it's how you get attention. I wonder if first generation college students would ever be like that. Like, will it ever be something that people don't actually think about what it means, but they're like, Oh yeah, we have first gen programs. We support our first gen students.
Well, let me just say that from my own view, I think that although there is a growing body of first generation research on undergraduates that you're experiencing and you're reviewing now,
Mhm.
there's and it's a growing body, but it's still rather recent. It's still rather new, because we have been, and rightfully so, concerned with lots of the other issues of diversity and the identity components of all of those things. Um, and that is still not brand new anymore, but it's still rather new. So I would be less at this point concerned with becoming a default or a cliche than defining it. There's so many different ways to talk about first generation experience too. We've had our director at the high school, Dr. Chow, considers himself first generation, but he is the son of immigrants. So there's that piece. And then there's different levels of higher education. Uh, our last interview had a faculty member who actually teaches now at Yale, but neither of her parents graduated elementary school. So we go from there all the way through high school and then college and then masters and so forth. So until we get a bit more, I think, sophisticated in what we're talking about when we talk about first generation experience, and then as you're doing, you're trying to step back and scale observations. I'm not so sure we should have that to worry about right now. Maybe
Mhm.
that'll come to it, but it's still such a new thing in education to be thinking about social class background compared to all of the other the identity issues that I think we have a ways before we get to cliche.
Mhm.
What do you
Mhm.
think? What do you think about that?
I hope that's right. I think it is. And I think that we all get into our bubbles, right? And so maybe us on this call or listening to this call, we're seeing a lot about first generation college students, but that doesn't mean that everyone is, because not everyone is feeding the same information into the algorithm that's choosing what they see on their LinkedIn or paying attention to the different programming and things. So I think that's a part of it too, is that it depends on who's focusing on it, because it's probably not it's probably not actually as widespread for audiences outside of those like us who are so cognizant of it and wanting to spend time thinking about this and wanting to spend time coming up with questions like these. And so I think you're right that it's not near becoming a buzzword or phrase yet, but we'll put that question in the to be answered later box. All right, what other questions do other people have about anything, really? My tortoise. You can ask me about my tortoise, what his name is if you want.
What is his name?
His name is Noggin. We just got him because my son, my 5-year-old, who wants to be a DJ in the future, he doesn't want a dog or a cat. I was like, don't you want like a dog or a cat? And he's like, no, I want a tortoise. And I was like, oh no, those last forever. So that's kind of good. But there's benefits and there's consequences. But yeah, we have a little tortoise. We have no idea how old it is. It's probably gonna outlive me, but his name is Noggin. Thank you for
Is
asking.
he named Noggin because of Finding Nemo?
No, but my students said that too, and I did not recall that. It's this game called My Singing Monsters, which I don't know when it like having I don't know how many people have kids. Laura, I think you mentioned you have kids.
I do.
Laura and Casey. So My Singing Monsters, he discovered it on some YouTube video. I don't know if it's popular right now or if we're living in like a parallel world where we're just like playing games that were popular like a decade ago. But he liked this character and he was like, I want to get a tortoise and I want to name it Noggin. It's like, that's better than like tort. I don't know. It's kind of
This sounds like 5-year-old logic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get a lot of that. That's fun.
Well, I have another question. Other than Noggin and the rest of your family, Laura,
Mhm.
what other kind of what other kind of social capital have you built along your journey to help you continue moving and being successful?
Oh man, so what I have done, and I say this all the time, I was looking back at an SJSU like profile, like the alumni profile or something that I did to see if what I said right after I graduated and got into the professional world was still true. And it is, because anytime anybody asks me about like, oh, like, how is your degree worth it? And like, what did you think you did really well in school? What would you have been differently in undergrad or grad? I'm like, I did internships and I should have done those earlier, because networking and building out connections and doing that linking to people who are professionals and who have their own networks and who have more resources than I do. Because I came from this background where we moved around a lot. I wasn't in the military. People always ask, or I wasn't. My family was not either. We just moved around a lot. We just like didn't have like stable roots. And my parents didn't have professional jobs. They didn't really have networks and connections as well. And so I missed out on that. And ideally, I would have started in undergrad to start to like make up for that so that I could have some options to help to get professional experience. I didn't though. But then when I got to grad school, I went and I was like, I'm going to do internships because I don't want to work at Applebee's anymore. I kept working at Applebee's, but I also did the internships. And then one led to a full-time role. And that's like the moment once I got that full-time role, I was able to just start like building off, and it's all just like a ripple effect, because up to the position before the one before this, it was from a connection from that grad school internship. And like I kept the couple of people who I met connected me to somebody who connected me to somebody. And it's like all of my professional experiences have been tied to the people I know, and all the people I know professionally started out with this internship that I did during grad school, which is like, it's so wild. It's wild to be able to see just such a direct connection to it. And then I've used those same skills too, because the role that I'm taking on in the fall, I met somebody who was teaching in the school, and I just like had coffee with her because I met her through somebody whose kid goes to my preschool, and I had mentioned to them that I wanted to get into adjunct instructing, and they were like, oh, we should introduce you to this person. And so it's like the concept works, but I really like that the one, like the longest running thread has been since I was at SJSU doing internships, like gotten so much value out of that. So I'd say, yeah, that's I don't even know how like, I guess proving myself is like the way that I gain that social capital, by just like showing up and being inquisitive and using my library skills, and people love a librarian. So, and that's what I do now too. I go to the librarians and I bond with them on these campuses, and they love it. And they're very excited because they're like, the faculty members don't normally talk to us, and you're talking to us, and this is great. And so I got in with this one who I was working with for my classes, my English class that I was talking about too. And I'll just like go chat with them, and they'll be like, can we like help you with anything? And I'm like, yes, of course, please come to my class. And it's kind of fun. And then I just connected with this one, and now I'm on the public library board here too. So using my library and connections, I'm not doing the direct library thing, but I'm spreading the good word, I promise.
That's awesome. I think
Thank
too,
you.
like it's, yeah, everybody always talks about, connections and networking. And I think it's so easy for me anyways. It's so easy for me to be like, yeah, I get it, but I'll just, whatever. And I think really having to like push yourself to like get out there and make those connections is where maybe other people struggle with. I know that's something for me. But like I will literally have to like set a goal for myself, even if I'm going somewhere with people I know. It was like a get together for my classics department. And I told my husband, I was like, don't let me leave until I talk to 3 new people. Like, and he talked to like 7 new people because he's just, and I'm like standing there, I'm like, why do you want to have a conversation with me? Like, it's so hard.
Perhaps there should be a class for introverts to
Mm.
have to network. I don't want to take the class because I don't want to be in. But honestly, like, yeah, I don't unless I'm working with you. And my version of social capital kind of, I started as an extra help person, and I built this little, as Dr. Bernier says, a personal board of directors at the library. And I built friendships with people, and I ended up getting hired. And it's exactly what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. So I don't know if that's taking a risk, or finding a place that you think maybe you can get in and you got a little bit of a chance and someone actually lets you in, and just building it that way. I guess, at least for me, it was something that I felt passionate about. I love the library and I love the people I work with. And so I got lucky that way. I don't know.
Oh yeah, conferences are a good way to do it too. And it's so I feel you, Laura. It's like uncomfortable. And I don't know if I'm not an introvert, but I don't think I'm an extrovert either. But I then go in front of an audience and I get like hyped. And so then I'm like, maybe I'm like a little extrovert. I can't tell. I'm definitely more extroverted than my husband is, because your example, I would be talking to 7 people and he would be like standing in the corner drinking a whiskey and be like, come on. But yes, like conferences are great. Volunteer stuff is really good too. I've gotten a lot of, like, with the public library board that I just got appointed to by the city council, I've met so many people through that too, and they're all excited because not everybody on the board has library experience, library like specific expertise as well. And so I'm like hobnobbing with like these like senators and or former senators and stuff. It's kind of wild. And yeah, setting goals is a good idea too, because then telling someone that you set that goal so they hold you accountable.
Mhm.
And I believe there's a buzzword term, and it's called ambivert.
It's called
It's
what?
like an ambivert. It's like between
Oh,
an introvert and an extrovert, because I can be extroverted if I need to. I don't like to, but I think I'm in the middle somewhere too.
right.
Casey, I think you just changed my life by assessing what I am. Amber Heard. Okay. I did not spell it right, but I'm gonna look it up.
I'm also, I love looking things up. So that's what happens when you look things up.
Yeah.
I think I saw a post about that once. It was like, I don't want to be running it, but I will because no one else is doing it or something like that. And I was like, oh, so a first gen. Like, you don't
Yes,
want to do it, but
actually.
you're going to be there because you need it to be done the way you want it to be done.
Yes.
So
Yes,
funny.
because you're the one blazing the trail. So you're gonna do it right.
Yeah, I'm totally an ambivert. Like that is exactly what I am. Yes, I love it. I wonder, so it sounds like many of us are like believing that we are ambiverts. I wonder why that would be a trend across this audience.
That's actually a theme that I feel like we've discussed multiple times in past meetings, is just the way that we're like, we have this immediate need almost to like take a charge. So it's like you'll be assigned in a group, and if somebody is like, I want to be the leader, you're like, great. But if nobody says it within like the first 5 minutes, you're like, I'm the default leader, and you're like getting it done. And I feel like it's just a trait that so many of us have. And it was really funny because so when you agreed to do this meeting with us, and then like the next day sent us the slides, I was like, oh, she's so first gen. And the group was like, oh, 100%. Because it was like immediately you needed to get it done and like make sure you knew what you were
Yes.
doing. And I'm like, such a first gen quality.
That is very true, because you always like, especially, you can't wait till the last minute, because if you don't know what the situation is, if you wait till the last minute, you can't get more information, you can't confirm what you're assuming about the situation. I never like associated it with that, but that is part of it, is that I'm like, yeah, sure, I have no idea what you're talking about or what the format is or how formal informal it is, so let me do something so you can react to it, so then I can like write my course if it's off. And so that is totally related to, okay, sure, I can do whatever. I just have to have enough time for myself and like get enough information to be able to show up in the way that I need to. Yes.
Well, how about this? Let's flip the script a little bit. People who know the story, they know the terrain, they know somebody else is going to step up and do it. And so they kind of rely upon that. And in a way, it's a little bit exploitive.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I never thought of it like
They
that.
know there's always somebody like Laura around who, if you be quiet long enough, she'll step up, and then you can just ride on her coattails.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that
And
blew my mind just a little bit.
And I feel like it's one of those things that probably both sides are like aware of and ignoring. You know what I mean? Like, because I never thought of it in that frame, but
Yeah.
there's always that person in the group who you're like texting the other person and you're like, oh my God, that person is going to show up tomorrow and be like, oh, I see you already did the work. Thanks, guys. And then of course you get that inevitable text. So like you're aware of it, but I never framed it in the way that they're aware of like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that kind of, I never thought of it from the other perspective, because my first inclination is to always go, all right, if there's a pause, I'll just do it because I
Yeah,
want it done
I'll
right,
just do
I'll
it.
do it. I'll
Yeah.
just do it. But I never really thought that there would actually be a conscious thought on other people's parts, perhaps people who are familiar with this process, that they're gonna just be like, oh, someone will step up. Don't gotta worry about it.
Laura, you even got the voice right. Oh, thanks, guys.
Can you tell I've done it a time or two?
And I feel like that's related to the adaptive structuration theory, because if you stop being the one who volunteers, Laura, you'll stop being the one who volunteers because someone else will do it then. But
Yeah.
you are the one who volunteers. So you are the one who volunteers. You get like,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
what I mean?
Oh, it's all interconnected.
Amazing. This is so great.
What was that meme with Charlie Day and all the strings and the
Yeah.
that's so great.
Whenever I talk about theory, that's how I feel. Like I'm like, okay, there's a theory for this. And then I just do lots of and people are like, oh, interesting. And I'm like, just kidding, I made that theory up. No, these are real. These are real. I'm actually proposing, so it better be real.
That's awesome. Okay, we've got a couple minutes left. So if anybody has anything, any questions that they wanted to bring up, anything they wanted to make a note of, now would be a good time. Give you guys a second.
Well, speaking of networking, I'd love to connect with anybody who would like on LinkedIn. And there you go. That's one of your 3 people, Laura, that you talked to today. Check it off.
I had like one note. So when I was reading I was reading your study about like the different education of the parents. And one of the notes was like the mom's education had no significance on how the students were, but the dad's education level impacted academic achievement. And then I have in stars big eye roll because I was like, what is this shit? Like, because in my family, so I'm first gen, my husband is not, but again, like I'm about to graduate with my master's and I am the most educated in our family now. And I'm just like, if my son does not, like, it was just one of those things. And I feel like it's probably like, on average in a household, you have a male partner who is more educated than a female partner, who makes more money than the female partner, whatever. And I get that that's whatever, but I was still just like so frustrated.
Yeah, I was surprised to find that. And so yes, I'm totally with you. It's like, really? Really? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pick up on a note that Rosa just posted in the chat, and not only thank Laura tonight, and I know she's under some pressure about her coming up next week. So thank you very much again, Laura. And I would like to stay in touch with you both for your research and also for your insights going forward for our group. But also I'd like to take this moment to thank Laura and Caitlin too. They're both finishing. They're both planning on attending the graduation ceremony in the spring. And I hope you guys make special plans to be there together. And I know I'm going to be alerting some faculty there to be on the lookout for you and your families. But I want to thank Laura in particular and Caitlin as well for the leadership that they've shown this group. They've stayed in touch. They've all got things going on. We all do, but they do in big time. So both of you, thank you very much for passing the torch. And we're going to continue with our conversation, and we'll continue building our first generation conversation long after you're gone. So thank you again. Good luck to you both. Stay in touch with me. I'm a good letter writer. Believe that.
All right. Okay, so that brings us to an hour. That was, I think, the fastest hour I've ever experienced in one of these. I had a great time. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura. I really enjoyed hearing about your research, and I really enjoyed listening to you speak. It was really great. I really hope that whoever takes over for us gets you back in the future sometime and sends me an invite, because I'd love to hear updates on your research. So if they ever contact you, let me know on LinkedIn so I can
Okay.
hop in.
Got it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.